What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to this week's installment on The Lake Show, and I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day again. Last week, I discussed a little bit about some early moves being made in the NFL when it comes to free agency. Obviously, we saw Deebo Samuel heading from San Francisco to the Washington Commanders, and really showing that Washington is going all in on this Super Bowl window, which they definitely have a Super Bowl window right now with Jaden Daniels at quarterback. They're just expanding upon that. They are adding more depth. They are adding more weapons. And now what are we going to talk about this week? Well, we got a bunch of NFL early free agency topics to talk about. A bunch of moves have already been made this past weekend, and I'm sure as I'm recording right now on this Monday morning for Tuesday morning that there will be more moves that have happened, but there are already some big time moves that have been made in the NFL. So we're going to be talking about the NFL free agency. We're going to talk a little bit about the NBA and the NFL draft, but we'll spend a little bit less time on the NFL draft today. But as you all know, I'm a Bucked Up ambassador, so use promo code SHOW32. Get yourself 20% off any and all pre-workout orders at buckedup.com. So without hesitating, let's get started. And we're going to start with the Cincinnati Bengals franchise tagging Tee Higgins. So now this has been a big-time discussion for the better part of 2 years now, because the Cincinnati Bengals already franchise tagged Tee Higgins last year, and Tee Higgins was looking for, a contract extension to stay in Cincinnati with Ja'Marr Chase and Joe Burrow. Well, that did not happen whatsoever. The Cincinnati Bengals continue to prove how cheap they are and refuse to pay Tee Higgins. Now, granted, the franchise tag is not a bad thing in my opinion, just because of how much guaranteed money you will get for this upcoming NFL season. But obviously, players want security for years to come, not just a single year where he'll be under contract. Now, Tee Higgins, he's a great number 2 wide receiver, and I think he has potential still to be a number 1 wide receiver on a decent amount of teams in the NFL. But I think this says more about the Cincinnati Bengals than it does Tee Higgins as a talent, because usually when you franchise tag someone, the talent is kind of there, but it's not necessarily superstar talent, but you still know how vital they are to the team, so you keep them around on the franchise tag. Well, looking at the Cincinnati Bengals, this is easily the cheapest ownership group, the cheapest team probably in the entirety of the NFL. I mean, it's more cheap than the Raiders, but the Raiders obviously paid Max Crosby. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but going forward, if I'm Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase, I want out of Cincinnati. I cannot continue to withstand all the garbage that the organization has thrown their way. If I'm Joe Burrow, I'm a perennial MVP candidate from a year ago on a 9-8 team. Now, if Cincinnati actually had a defense, I believe they would have actually made the playoffs and made noise in the playoffs, and they were still on the doorstep of the playoffs despite being kind of awful during the regular season, defensively speaking, of course. But when you look at Joe Burrow, why should he want to sit around and deal with all this nonsense? Cincinnati's ownership group has notoriously been cheap. They've never spent big money on big players. Now, Joe Burrow, you have to pay your franchise quarterback, so they did pay Joe Burrow, but they're holding out on paying Ja'Marr Chase, I believe, still. I mean, there's just so much crap that happens there. It's hard to keep it straight. They franchise tagged Tee Higgins, and they allowed Trey Hendrickson to seek a trade partner. Trey Hendrickson literally led the NFL in sacks last year. That is one of the most vital pieces you need in the NFL as a good, great pass rusher. And Cincinnati has it. And the Achilles heel of this team a year ago was defense. So why on earth, as Cincinnati, why would you not pay Trey Hendrickson? I don't know how they don't have the money to spend. I sometimes don't understand the whole NFL cap rules and all that stuff. I'm trying to learn that a little bit more, but it's very intricate. But when you look at a team like Cincinnati, you are you have an all-time kind of talent at quarterback, Joe Burrow, who statistically had the worst offensive line in football the year they went to the Super Bowl, and yet he still delivered. They just ran into the juggernaut Los Angeles Rams team led by Matthew Stafford. But going forward, if I was Joe Burrow, I want out. I'm probably requesting a trade. Now, Cincinnati Bengal fans aren't going to like to hear that, but I'm willing to bet that a lot of Cincinnati fans would agree with me because of that certain aspect that the organization is just so cheap. They just refuse to pay their great players. And I don't understand the reasoning behind it. You have Trey Hendrickson, you have Jamar Chase, you have Tee Higgins, you have Joe Burrow, and steadily okay average offensive line, but the defense is absolutely burnt toast. The secondary is awful. When you look at this team, we're right on the doorstep of the playoffs. Pittsburgh does their usual crap and BS, doing good in the regular season and then crapping the bed in the playoffs. Baltimore's a juggernaut in the AFC North and the AFC in general. We know that. Cleveland's a dumpster fire. Cincinnati's right in the mix of where they should be. They should be competing for, honestly, Super Bowls every year because of Joe Burrow. You need an all-time talent quarterback like Joe Burrow to compete for championships in the first place. So why you wouldn't pay Tee Higgins in general just to keep surrounding Joe Burrow with the talent that he needs to succeed in Cincinnati? We saw what it looks like when you have a number one option and nothing else. And it's not necessarily the greatest comparison because, the quarterback is way less talented than Joe Burrow, but Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. Dak Prescott isn't a bad quarterback. He's an average quarterback, maybe slightly above average. I'd give him a B plus level grade. But when all you have is your number one wide receiver, and when defenses take advantage of that, they can tee off on you on the whole day. That's exactly what plagued Dallas last year, is the fact that they don't have enough skill position players on offense. All they have is CeeDee Lamb and nothing else. And now that's going to be the case probably in the coming years for the Cincinnati Bengals. So why franchise Tee Higgins? I get it. You keep him one more year, but if Tee Higgins goes off next year, let's say him and Jamar Chase have more career years, well then Cincinnati better pony up some more money because Tee Higgins' stock probably just went way, way up again. And adding to that, they're still probably not going to pay Trey Hendrickson, and more than likely they're going to trade him this offseason. So you have already a terrible defense that was highlighted by Trey Hendrickson leading the NFL in sacks, and now you don't have your pass rusher anymore. What the Cincinnati Bengals are doing right now is absolutely ridiculous. I would have paid Tee Higgins, and I know plenty NFL teams will be willing to pay for Tee Higgins. Now let's transition to another contract. Let's transition to a contract extension I personally didn't see coming, but I think all of Cleveland fans rejoice in that. Myles Garrett became one of the highest paid non-quarterbacks in NFL history by signing an extension with Cleveland this past weekend. I don't know what Cleveland told him. I don't know what Cleveland tried to do. I don't know what Cleveland did in general to get Myles Garrett to stay in Cleveland, because literally a week ago, Myles Garrett was dead set on getting out of Cleveland. My best bet is that Cleveland sat him down and told him straight up, we want to make you the highest paid player in the NFL or the highest defensive paid player ever, and we're going to draft a different quarterback. Now, I know that Cleveland and Watson, they're having, there's a dispute there because I know they're trying to get out of that contract with Deshaun Watson to at least nullify it and completely get rid of it. They want to cut ties with Watson as soon as they possibly can. And I see Cleveland, I still see them, despite what's going on with Deshaun Watson and his injury, and I believe there's a lawsuit at least between Cleveland and Watson when it comes to the contract dispute and his health. I believe he was required to wear a boot when he tore his Achilles and then ruptured it again, and possibly believe that, he was not wearing the boot in order to prevent that. So, that's up in the air. But I still believe Cleveland's going to take a quarterback, and I believe that quarterback's probably going to be Cam Ward. But I think just the sheer amount of talent Cleveland still has on that roster, I think Myles Garrett looks at that and says, okay, if you're going to bring in a quarterback, let me in on the draft plans. I want to know who you're going to surround this team with. Like, if I'm still going to stick with Cleveland, I at least want to know, what the game plan is. Now, from a managerial standpoint, this is a tough situation for Cleveland still, because you gave Myles Garrett now so much guaranteed money on top of the Deshaun Watson contract, which is still handicapping you guys. Now there's really no money for Cleveland to go elsewhere to add talent to the roster. I think they can, squeeze in maybe a Christian Kirk type of wide receiver, or a lower end kind of wide receiver in free agency, just adding more weapons to the stockpile in Cleveland. But looking at this, there's two aspects to this. Obviously, you keep Myles Garrett, you keep a generational pass rusher in Cleveland. You keep him to please your fans, and you keep him to keep that defense bolstered. Now it all falls on the GM and the coach to see what they do in the NFL draft. So eventually we're going to see how this pans out. I just don't know. I think it's a pretty good deal for Cleveland. I think you needed to keep Myles Garrett in, because in this NFL draft, there is nobody that is close. And even that includes Abdul Carter. There is nobody in this draft that compares to the talent that Myles Garrett brings to the table. Myles Garrett will go down as one of the best pass rushers in NFL history, and certainly of this generation. Him and TJ Watt are going to be like that. Him and TJ Watt are going to be probably the pass rushers of the 2020s or the 2020s. At least they'll probably be on the all-decade team. But that was probably one of the most shocking stories I heard this past weekend, because I did not expect whatsoever Myles Garrett to stay in Cleveland, but Myles Garrett is indeed staying in Cleveland. Excuse me. Now, let's transition to another trade that recently happened. The Pittsburgh Steelers actually made moves on offense for once, and are actually spending money on offense for once. What a day. That never happens in Pittsburgh. But Pittsburgh, 2 nights ago on Sunday, traded a 2025 second-round draft pick to the Seattle Seahawks for DK Metcalf. Now, I've been saying for a while that Pittsburgh needs more help on offense. Now, I know there's an injury issue there, and I know DK is kind of a head case to a lot. This is going to be the most aggressive wide receiving core in the NFL, that's for sure. You got 2 pit bulls out there like DK and George Pickens. They're going to be, that's the NFL crash-out dream right there when it comes to wide receiver. But looking at it from a talent perspective, if you have DK at the 1, Pickens at the 2, and then you fill in the rest, I believe this is a must-needed move that Pittsburgh had to make. And again, they could have probably stole a wide receiver at the 21st pick in this upcoming draft, whether that be Emeka Egbuka or Matthew Golden or Isaiah Bond, one of those guys. But they decided to go out and get a proven superstar in the NFL, DK Metcalf, 2-time Pro Bowler, and honestly looked at as a top 10 wide receiver in the league, and in some cases, when healthy, a top 5 receiver in the league. He's very A.J. Brown-esque, and I think he has more talent than A.J. Brown, but again, the issues surrounding Seattle, there's just a lot there. So Pittsburgh brings in DK Metcalf now. Now this goes to beg the question, what's the plan at quarterback? Russ, we 99% sure Russ is not coming back. Not coming back whatsoever to Pittsburgh. That was done, it's over with, and moved on. Pittsburgh still has not reached a deal, though, with Justin Fields. I'm not entirely sure what the negotiations are looking like. I'm not in the building with them, but I'm willing to bet it's realistically, what Justin brings to the table, and I believe it's an okay amount. Athleticism, the accuracy is spotty at best. He has a good arm, and he's very mobile. But again, I talked about it last week when I went to the Pittsburgh and Dallas game. I knew that just Justin Fields is not the guy for Pittsburgh. I don't believe he's the future of Pittsburgh football. But there's a rumor swirling around now that Aaron Rodgers has emerged as a Steeler option for this upcoming season. And I also heard a rumor that Pittsburgh would still draft a quarterback, probably in the second round or late in the first round, which I really hope they don't do it in the first round. I think that's a perfect opportunity to either get another top offensive lineman or another great skill position player. But when you look at this, I talked about it, how I don't want Aaron Rodgers on the team. The more I think about it, if we were to draft a Jackson Dart, let's say, in the NFL draft, and have him learn behind Aaron Rodgers, I don't see that's not a bad way to go. Pittsburgh has been dying for a quarterback solution since Big Ben retired, and I'm one of the few who believe that Pittsburgh held on to Big Ben at least 2 to 3 years longer than they should have. They should have moved off him a while ago before he retired there, but I get why they kept him. He was the cornerstone of the franchise, but going forward, I don't know what to make of the quarterback situation in Pittsburgh quite yet. Closer to the NFL draft, I'm sure we'll have more answers, but as of right now, Aaron Rodgers has emerged as one of the top selections for Pittsburgh to pursue in free agency. Now, back to DK Metcalf, you need talent in the NFL. You need offensive pieces. You need to bolster up a team like that. You have George Pickens, you have Pat Freiermuth. I do not know if Najee Harris will return or Jaylen Warren, but you still have those two. And not much, and a spotty offensive line. I think this needed to happen. You need another guy out there other than Pickens that is reliable to catch the football, and DK has proven that. Yeah, he has a little bit of a temper, but when he's on his game, he's probably one of the best to do it on the planet. We know that's true. So DK Metcalf, he will be signing a $150 million contract. I believe it's over 5 or 6 years. I believe it's 5 years, worth $150 million. I'm not sure the amount of guaranteed he's being given, but I think this is great news for Pittsburgh. I have never seen spending like this in general on offense for Pittsburgh. It has been defense, defense, defense for the better part of 20 years. That's what Pittsburgh's known for. That's what Pittsburgh will probably always be known for, is defense and defensive spending. The only years I don't remember us having great defense was when Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, and Big Ben were all in their prime. The Killer Bees were in their prime, and that offense was prolific, one of the best in the NFL. But the defense suffered. And as we all know, no Super Bowl rings in that time. So Pittsburgh trades a 2025 second-round draft pick for DK Metcalf. And I'm of the firm belief, when you do a move like this, you have to look at the talent available at that point in the draft. Is there anybody? It's the same not really excuse, but it's the same explanation I gave last week about the 49ers giving up a third-round pick, or I believe it was a fifth-round pick, something like that. I believe it was a fifth-round pick, the more I think about it. But you give up a certain draft pick for a player of his caliber, you have to look in the NFL draft at that moment in time. Will there be anybody available with that upside and that skill set that can match that player in this moment in time? And personally, I don't believe there is a wide receiver in this draft, at least when it comes to the second round, that'll be there that can provide what DK Metcalf can provide right now. So I think this was a smart move for Pittsburgh, and I can't wait to see this unfold, at least for the quarterback situation. So the first domino for Pittsburgh has fallen. We knew they needed to get more talent on the offensive side. They got it in DK Metcalf. Now Pittsburgh patiently waits for the quarterback situation to be resolved. Okay, I saw two players that were recently released, and we're just going to go over these briefly, but you have Evan Ingram, longtime Jaguars tight end, was released, and Chargers defensive end Joey Bosa was also released. So when you look at the Chargers, this needed to happen. They need more talent on the offense badly. The defense already looked good last year. They really did. Light years ahead of where Brandon Staley was able to take them. But I think, in order to save cap space, I believe they'll save like $25 million in cap space by releasing Bosa. Joey Bosa, been in the NFL a long time now. Injury prone, old, brittle, he's just on the back end of his career. He's still a decent player. But again, I don't think he can be the cornerstone that the Chargers need at the defensive side of the football anymore. So we'll see, and we'll end up seeing how that plays out for the Chargers. I think it's going to be a definite loss for them because I still think Joey Bosa, when healthy, is one of the most productive defensive players in the league. But looking at it from the grand scheme of things, they need more cap space for more offensive pieces. The Chargers have J.K. Dobbins. They just let Gus Edwards walk too, and they have Vlad McConkey and nothing else. Quentin Johnston is still a NFL draft bust. That man cannot catch a football. That man cannot catch a flu if he was in a room full of sick people. So that says a lot about the Chargers doing this. I think that's to make room for more offensive pieces that they're going to bring in. And I'll talk about one more NFL free agency signing, and that is Devante Adams heading to the Los Angeles Rams. I think this is going to have a similar feel as when the Rams brought in Odell Beckham after he left Cleveland years ago. Now, we all remember how that happened. Odell Beckham actually balled out when he was with Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and a great offensive line and a great offense in general and a great offensive-minded head coach in Sean McVay. I think Devante Adams coming into LA, is he what he was before? No. But could he still be a productive wide receiver? Yes, absolutely. The Jets, I'm discounting the Jets in general because I think they make everybody look bad. That organization has been up there with Cleveland and the Giants the past 10 years of just complete inept and just garbage moves and garbage hirings and just an overall dumpster fire. If I had to choose like my top 10 dumpster fires over the past 10 years, Cleveland is definitely up there, even though they have a playoff win under their belt in the past 10 years. But still, Cleveland, the Giants, the Jets, and the Bears. Those have been my 4 dumpster fires for the better part of 10 years, better part of a decade. But now going forward, at least for the Rams' sake, I think this is a good move for Devante Adams, and I think this is a good move for the Rams. You bring in, I know they're going to want to let Cooper Kupp go because of his age, his injury history. We get it. But Devante Adams is also old, a little bit brittle. But I think pairing him with Matthew Stafford and an offensive design and a great offensive system, which Sean McVay at the helm, Matthew Stafford at the quarterback, I think this is a smart move for the Rams to bring in some more veteran leadership on the wide receiving core, pair him with Puka Nakua. You got Kyron Williams in the backfield. Again, I told everybody last week that the Rams are primed and ready to make noise as a dark horse Super Bowl contender. Do I think Devante Adams puts them over the edge? No. If you said this to me 5 years ago, I would have said yes. But the way the player Devante Adams is now, I don't necessarily believe that he makes them like instant Super Bowl favorites, but it definitely helps. If Cooper Kupp's not going to be on the team, you still need, it's always good to have a veteran, presence on the team at any position group. I think it's important to have a veteran, at least in some instances, on a lot of position groups in the NFL on your roster. So I think bringing in Devante Adams will only further benefit the Rams in general. I don't believe that this will hinder them whatsoever. It gives them a little bit of a buffer, letting Cooper Kupp go. You're basically replacing Cooper Kupp with a more talented yet still old Cooper Kupp. Now, I think Devante Adams is a way better wide receiver than Cooper Kupp, but you get what I mean when I'm saying they're both old. They're both not what they were, but they both can still be productive. And I don't really think the Rams will skip a beat. I think they just want out of that Cooper Kupp contract. So Devante Adams signs with the Rams. I think that's a pretty good move. And I think, again, I don't think it moves the needle one way or the other as far as the Rams being Super Bowl contenders and favorites, but I think it will definitely help them in the long run. All right, so now that was a little bit of NFL free agency. I'm going to finish off the show with a little bit of NBA and NFL draft. I'm going to give you my top 5 NFL quarterback draft prospects, because there's been a lot of rumors swirling around of certain quarterbacks falling out of the first round, but I'm going to give you my personal top 5 quarterbacks for the NFL draft. Number 1, Cam Ward. There's no doubt about it. His poise, his charisma in the pocket, his arm strength, his accuracy, his arm angles, his mobility. Even though he's not lightning fast, he is mobile enough. I think Cam Ward is going to succeed in the NFL, and I think just he plays with a chip on his shoulder, like a monumental size chip on his shoulder. And I think that gives him an edge because he plays like he believes he's the best. And I think he is the best in this draft. There's a lot of hate on all these quarterbacks saying that there's no surefire first round picks and stuff like that. Like most quarterbacks, like this is comparable to the Kenny Pickett draft. I don't see that whatsoever. I think there's much more talent and upside to this draft than the one with Kenny Pickett and Malik Willis, who are both backups now in the league. But I think there's potential here with a lot of these quarterbacks. So my first quarterback on the board, probably the first overall pick in the draft, Cam Ward. My number 2 quarterback in this draft, Jackson Dart. Now, my issue with him is he needs to learn how to read defenses more properly, and every time he seems to go through his progressions, if the first or second read isn't there, it's almost like he kind of goes off the rails. But I think Jackson Dart as a talent is better than my 3rd favorite quarterback in this draft, Shedeur Sanders. And there's a lot of rumors swirling around that Shedeur can possibly drop out of the first round in general. Some NFL teams I have seen have said that they see him as a 2nd to 3rd round pick, a 2nd to 3rd round talent quarterback. Now, I think a lot of this hate comes and stems from his dad, but either way, I still think that Shedeur Sanders can be successful in this league, especially his accuracy. He's more of a pocket passer. Like, that's what the NFL needs, and he's not really mobile, but he's like Cam Ward in being mobile enough, but Cam Ward is way more mobile than him. So I have Shedeur Sanders at number 3. Number 4, Quinn Ewers from Texas. Yep. I have him above Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, Dylan Gabriel. I think, I think he's going to be a good backup in the league. I think he could be a starter in this league, but again, the inconsistencies at Texas were very prevalent, and it's kind of his fault that it kind of fell apart in the college football playoff against Ohio State. He made untimely mistakes, and that was really the story of his college career at Texas. Sometimes untimely mistakes, sometimes he looks like the best quarterback in the country. But he is my number 4. And number 5, my 5th best quarterback going into this draft, honestly, is Kyle McCord. Led the entire FBS in passing yards last year, has great accuracy. I would compare him to a Kirk Cousins-like quarterback, and I think he could definitely start on an NFL team. He'll start as a backup, but I think there's a possibility that he could be a starter in the future. And now we're going to finish off today's episode with a little bit of NBA. And I'm going to give you my outlook on this. The 2 best teams in the NBA, and I'm also going to own something that I said last year in the NBA offseason. But right now, the top 2 seeds in the East, the Cleveland Cavaliers, 54-10, and the Boston Celtics 46-18 as of 3/10/25. So looking at the NBA, I have to own something that I said last year. I thought the signing of Paul George to the Philadelphia 76ers would have propelled Philadelphia to be one of the representatives in the Eastern Conference Finals. I predicted that Philadelphia would reach the Eastern Conference Finals at minimum after they signed Paul George, pairing him with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. Yeah, Philadelphia is 11th in the East now and not even in the play-in tournament to get into the playoffs. The Philadelphia 76ers are awful. That was probably the worst sports take I have ever made in my entire life. I was ridiculous to say that Philadelphia would have been competing for a title. They're not even close to being competitive with other teams like the Heat or the Hawks right now. They're just hot garbage. You got Joel Embiid, who's so brittle, so injury prone, who got a max contract extension. You have all that garbage going on, refuses to play back-to-backs. Like, he's not in it. Like, he's just not a good, like, when he's on, he's one of the best big men in the league. When he's on the floor. This man is never on the floor. And when he is, it seems like he's very inconsistent all the time. So, and Paul George has been a bust free agency signing. It was an awful signing. It looks horrible now. I thought it was going to look better, but looking at the Philadelphia 76ers, this is hot garbage. This is one of the worst teams in the NBA right now. And how about after and here's where I'm going to, this is really what I'm going to finish off the show with. The Dallas Mavericks are 10th now in the West. They're 32-33. You have, after trading Luka Doncic, they have been god-awful. They have been horrible as a franchise and as a team in general. Anthony Davis got hurt. Go figure. He always does eventually. You know, the last 2 years he did fairly well staying healthy, but of course, the injury bug caught up with him. And unfortunately, Kyrie Irving tore his ACL, and he is done for the rest of the season. And honestly, the Dallas Mavericks NBA championship hopes for the foreseeable future, they're basically out the window. So the Lakers basically fleeced. Not basically, the Lakers fleeced the Dallas Mavericks with this Luka Doncic trade. Now, the Los Angeles Lakers, I didn't necessarily know how Luka and Bron would play together, but they're playing fairly well together. This offense is really good when either LeBron or Luka or both are on the floor at the same time. The Lakers are 40-22 now as of, March 10th, being the day I'm recording. The Lakers are 40-22 and second in the West, only behind the Thunder right now. The Lakers won this trade. You can already say that the Lakers won this trade. Now, a lot of people are going to say that you have to win a championship eventually with Luka in LA for you to say that they definitively won the trade, which I partially agree with. But looking at the injury history of Anthony Davis, looking at what happened to Kyrie, and looking at the Mavericks team in general, it's not looking good at all. I think the Lakers won this trade, and it's not even close. But one concern about the Lakers, the opponent's points per game is at 111. The Lakers' defense is just awful. But looking at it as a whole, if I had to pick my early NBA Finals prediction, I would take the Cleveland Cavaliers against the Denver Nuggets. I'm still a big Nuggets guy. Not a fan of them. I'm a fan of the Lakers, but again, Jamal Murray and Jokic in the playoffs are just absolutely different. And that's going to wrap it up this week on The Lake Show, everyone. Again, I really appreciate you all making me a part of your day. Be sure to like, subscribe, share with your friends, leave some comments down below. I'm your host, Dominic Lako. God bless.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up, it's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time